Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. I think we are in, but I don't trust YouTube with my life. So I will first just, refresh this window, see we're on in YouTube, and then give you all a proper hello. Yes, we're in. We are live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good something, depending on if you're watching this live or in zombie mode. Zombie mode doesn't mean you're dead. That means you're not watching it live, in a way. But anyway, before anything, my daily public service announcement to you all. Wear your fucking mask. I don't care if you want to die. That's your life. But if it's maybe you can kill others. Maybe your elders. So please wear your mask. With that said, hello, Mr. Grant Morrison. How are you, my friend?
Hey, how you doing? I'm good. I'm very good. I just finished two big projects today, so I'm kind of basking. I'm relaxing.
That's amazing. How's things around you? How things in your neck of the woods? Are things getting better with the virus? Are things okay, or there's still some?
Yeah, I mean, Scotland's done pretty well dealing with it. Though we just had a case right across the water behind me. We had a kind of outbreak yesterday, so everyone's staying indoors. But by and large, it's been good. I think countries with women in charge seem to have done a lot better in kind of controlling the virus and understanding what it was capable of. So we've done okay. But for me, it's been business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've been working at home all my life. It's just I live in the country, so I can get outside and breathe the fresh air, and it's been fine, But honestly, I haven't been further than 4 miles in the last 5 months.
Is there anything that? Another question first. Have you realized at all if you are overworking? Because a lot of your peers are telling me that, yes, supposedly the situation is the same because you comics people,
Yeah.
comics people, and then you realize it gets night. You look at the at the word process and you're like, I've done more than usual.
No, absolutely. I think everyone, especially editors and the people that we're working with, they're working from home, which is unusual for most of them, and they're kind of doing double the work. So yeah, I've noticed that as well. It's like, what the hell? Slow down a bit, Let's enjoy this anthropos while it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you miss from this? Like going to the, they knock on their door, knock, knock. Hey, everything is, virus is over, life is back to normal. You can go to the movies or a concert or a play or something. Is there anything you miss that you use?
No, not at all. Honestly, I'm very self-contained. What I miss is Los Angeles, because I've got so many of my friends are in Los Angeles, and I've got a place there, and my wife and I love to go there, and it's just I'm really missing it. I'm missing Laurel Canyon, I'm missing Sunset Strip, and I'm missing all my friends. So that more than anything, and I don't see it coming back anytime soon either. It's America's in meltdown. I have no idea when that's going to get fixed or sorted, or when people are going to get back to any kind of normality.
Yeah, and it's sad because California at the beginning did it as well as New York. This contain. They locked very early, but then they made a really bad choice, which is as other countries in Europe did, as you know, which is like let's open already. Like no, wait, no, let's open already. So California's in a really bad place now. So I want to go, to LA too. Of course, San Diego wanted to go. But every time I talk to them, it's like, I don't know when I'm going back to the US, especially to California. With considering how things are, it looks really scary.
I mean, I think people were in a bit of denial, so they were trying to restart things too quickly. And honestly, from my point of view, it's just don't break cover yet. Don't break cover. This isn't over. It's nowhere near over. And the longer we can just stay down, but then it's easy for me to say, I live in a nice place and I've got a job that allows me to continue to earn money through this. Other people have been devastated. So it's fun to imagine it going on a little while, but for other people, it's just, can we get this over with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you cannot tell the guy who needs to get on the subway, risk his life on the subway because he has to work or he will, make no money. They just need to do it. So we're in a really comfortable position. It's really, I always say it's very easy to talk from our side of things because we're used to work at home and we can make money from home anyway. They can't. They just can't.
Exactly. And most of my life is spent inside my head, so it doesn't make much difference. But that's true. This is very real. But the problem with it is that it's so real that people are in denial. It's like it's genuinely changing life. It's changing our lifestyle. It's changing how we do business. It's changing everything. And there's no real human response to this yet.
Yeah.
We're under attack from an alien organism, and we're not doing too well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because many times when you mention alien, people think you're talking about a creature from outer space. No, alien just means different.
Yeah,
alien means
different.
we don't know it. And I was telling you before we started, because before we were live, for everything we think we know, we don't even know if a virus is alive or dead. It's one of those things we don't know. So we really don't know. And especially with this virus, it's going to adapt. It's already adapting.
Yeah.
So it's like we just have to stay in a trench and be safe
Exactly.
until we know something, at least something.
And it's very much opposing. It's attacking the limits of what we do know. It's attacking the edges of our culture. It's a really interesting. It's not what the strongmen leaders of the world expected to have to fight. It doesn't listen to lies. It can't be cowed by bullying. It can't be stopped by the usual methods that they use. You can't send an army against it. So it's a very interesting attacker. It's attacking a lot of the foundations of what we have created and what people are living in right now, and the kind of leaders we have.
Yeah.
So many assumptions of what we are capable of and how we can defend ourselves are being eroded and destroyed.
Absolutely. Until now, those leaders, the macho leaders, they all thought we can all beat it with weapons. We just need the weapons. We'll beat it and our pounce in our chest. And it's showing.
But we can do it by pure denial. It was magical thinking, but magical thinking that had reached its limits. You can't deny nature. You just can't stop it. When the tsunami is coming in, you can say all you like, there is no water, but the tsunami will take you,
Absolutely. Like, I will look away. The water is not coming. Like, no, I'm sorry, that's not working. But by the end of the day, we were also talking about this before. When you mess with the balance, and guys, this is not talking about gods or goddesses or theology or anything like that. We're talking about balance. And this is a really scientific thing. When you play with the balance, when you mess with it, sooner or later, the balance is going to attack back. You're messing too much. Things needs to go back to place. So in a way, it's not even about that. It's even about what are we doing? What do we need to learn to correct the situation, right?
We have to observe what's going on. I think one of the original magical axioms is as above, so below. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not mystical. It's about the structure of the universe kind of reiterates on all levels. And so if you look at what's actually happening, I see in human society we're very divided right now. There's, people are really, struggling and having a lot of angry confrontations. And I see that as being mirrored in the cytokine storm in the human immune system, which happens with people in COVID. And so when COVID gets in and it affects people really badly, their own immune system rebels. So the disease becomes more out of control. We are actually seeing an attack. And during that attack, people have been super divided and people are turning on one another. It's like a cytokine storm in the immune system.
Yeah.
So to me, all these things work as metaphors, and I can look at the metaphor of the immune system and apply it to human society. And at least I'll get a story out of it. I don't know if it's entirely scientific, but for me, these kind of ways of thinking give me new ways of looking at what's going on.
Absolutely.
And it may well be that we are in reaction. The fact that kids are pouring onto the streets, knowing there's problems, this may be part of how the virus moves itself, how it gets around. It took out like a lion on the outskirts of the herd. It took out the weaker and the older members. And to survive, it has to get in there to the younger people. It really has to in order to survive and propagate. So that's what we're watching. And again, as you said, starting this off, this isn't mysticism. This is when you stress a system, the system will respond. It's cause and effect. Things happen with 7.5 billion human beings. It's probably too many. And so the system the Earth will try to deal with that. I'm quite sure it has to try and deal with that, or else its own survival is threatened. So to me, these things are quite obvious outcomes of of the way we have behaved in the last
Yeah,
100
absolutely.
or more years.
And it's also, about the part that is more fascinating in a way to me is to look at how society is going to need to change, whether they like it or not. The society we had until now, the virus. I am not saying the virus is conscious. It could be. I don't know, but I'm not saying it is. But
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have
exactly.
to.
That doesn't have to be. But in a way, just to give it a personification, it's like the virus is telling us, whatever you had until now as a society doesn't work. You fucking change it, or I'm going to kill you. In big numbers. You need to change the way you behave. You need to with the world. Like, it's time to move out of fossil fuels. It's time to move out of. It's time to let. I'm going to say it this way. I'm sorry if you don't like it. It's time to put women in charge because matriarchies or matriarch. I don't know how to pronounce in English. Matriarchies, and I'm a Celt. We always were a matriarchy. They work better. They don't like weapons so much. It's a different thing, and I think maybe it's time for all of these things to change. The virus is telling us change or die, evolve or die.
I agree, and again, I think what you're saying about put women in charge. Yeah, it's like give them the next 2,000 years and see what they can do with it. It doesn't necessarily guarantee utopia, but it guarantees a different way of looking at things, which we probably need. And again, the virus. What fascinated me that. During that, what scientists are now calling the anthropause, that moment where we all had to stay indoors, and suddenly the churches and the mosques and the temples of the old dad god were empty. But yeah, I don't know in other parts of the world, but in Britain, this spontaneous kind of thing developed where we'd all go out at Thursday at 8 o'clock and applaud the health service. Yes. So there was a kind of spontaneous need to kind of, give appreciation to a spirit that was nurturing and compassionate, rather than the judgmental father god that we. And I saw in that a little crack and the sense that this distributed network, this viral network, is the attacker. The sense that moving forward, we probably have to get beyond the god hero and the boy king, into something that's a more distributed network of human thinking.
Yeah,
and to see the virus playing that game with us and outwitting the boy kings and the god emperors was kind of fascinating, and to see the fact that people were going out in the streets and banging kettles and banging pots and pans to basically honor a feminine, compassionate, nurturing spirit. And that was something was happening there that, to me, again, looking at it metaphorically, looking at it for symbols, for stories, that fed directly into what I was doing with my Wonder Woman book, which I just finished yesterday and sent in the final volume. So yeah, totally, all of that. We need to hand over the custody of the world a little bit to networked women.
Yes, absolutely. That happened here too for like 3 months. Every day at 8 p.m. people in their balconies or their windows, the kettles and all that, and applauding the healthcare system too. Just also in a way, I guess that like with the NHS in the UK, just don't even try to tie your private services. Don't even try to to touch our public healthcare, because right now, if we knew it was important, right now we know it's even more important. So I think one of the things that the virus is going to provoke, and I say good things can happen out of this, as we said, women, but also now people really values, if they didn't, public healthcare and public education. So that's going to push them to say, if before they were going to look the other side like, I don't care, now they're going to say, hey, stop, you cannot touch that, because with the virus in Spain at least 30,000 people died. We need a stronger healthcare system, because if we have it, that wouldn't happen again. Or at least it would happen in much slower numbers.
But again, it remains to be seen. I mean, we're up against a desire from big business to privatize everything and to monetize and to commodify everything. So I'm sure that we'll see, after the shock of this, people are still reeling. I think we'll see attempts made to privatize the health service, to privatize even the police, to privatize all of these services.
Yeah.
So that's what we should probably be watching out for right now.
Yeah.
Because those big business interests are very keen to take away anything that looks as if it might be vaguely communist and might not provide money, might not be a source of money. So it's kind of, will the feminine spirit be able to deal with the last gasp of the rapacious male spirit? That's going to be interesting to watch and fundamental probably to our futures.
Let's move on to comics, but continue with this with
sure.
Barrier Society and all that. That why of course you grow up reading comics and loving it, I guess, like most everybody in this business. But why did you decide at the beginning comics is what I want to do instead of starting as a novelist, as a playwright, TV or movies? Just comics as your first love.
No, it wasn't really the first. Honestly, I wanted to be a writer from when I was a kid, and in the late 70s, I wrote a couple of fantasy novels, which were just kind of they were quite good. But I almost got a book deal based on one of them. I also wanted to write plays. All my heroes like Dennis Porter or Alan Bleasdale or David Rudkin were BBC playwrights, so that was my thing at the time. And I tried comics and I did the near myth stuff, and I had this idea, and all of us in near myths had this idea of we could elevate comics and make them more adult, and that was coming from Brian Talbot and people like that who really blazed the trail. So comics seemed like a possibility, but at the end of the 70s and into the 80s, there was no outlet for that type of work, and near myths folded after 5 issues, and a lot of the kind of experimental ground level titles disappeared as well. So really, it wasn't until Warrior came out, and so V for Vendetta and Marvelman specifically, and I just thought this has now potential. This is going to explode. This is going to be the new place where you can express yourself and be poetic and be the playwright and be everything I want to be without too much editorial intrusion. And that's how it seemed, and that was very galvanizing, and it kind of came true. It worked out that way. These things did lead to an explosion of more sophisticated material, which I was really glad to be part of.
And why? What do you think makes this is something I always ask, so bear with me. What do you think makes the comics language so unique? Many things. I know it's many things, but the first time you go on screen, go please.
But obviously, I think the first thing is the tactile nature of a comic. That you're holding a comic. There's I've even gone so far as to say there's an erotic kind of bond between you and the comic, because really, when you look at a comic, all you're looking at is scratches on paper. It's not like filmed human beings. It's not even like animation. It's actual scratches on paper. I'm sure people could look at that who had, whatever form of brain damage and see only scratches on paper. But when we collaborate with those scratches on paper as readers, and we're touching the thing and we're turning the pages, I think we create a kind of holographic effect. Our need for meaning is answered by these scratches. And to me, it's very weird that people can look at drawings and take emotions from them and take meaning from them and take these kind of actual, experiential things from a story. It's particularly a comic story, and it's so bizarre. You see people's thoughts floating, you see their words actually on the page, in this very strange graphic format, and yet it works, and yet you can be caught up in it. You can be caught up in the flow of static images, and so much so that it can break your heart or move you to tears or have you punching the ceiling. So there's something about the collaboration. Again, I'll use the word erotic in its finest sense. You're touching the thing, you're touching a crystallization or a condensation of the intent of the writer and the artist and the colorist and everyone who made the thing, and you're collaborating with it to bring it to life. If you fall asleep in front of the television, the thing will still play out and they'll still act the drama. If you fall asleep in front of the comic, nothing happens until you wake up again. So it's very much it's a dance, and I think that's what gives it its special flavor. It's why it's amenable to magic, and why I find it so magical. There's a real holographic collaborative effect between the reader and the creators in a comic book that is very different from any other medium.
Yeah, I love that you call it a dance because in a way that's like an attack. I don't know you say that atavic. Atavic in Spanish is that it comes from the
Yeah, yeah,
from atavic thing. When I always talk also about the comics are helped a lot by our all atavic ways, which is pattern recognition. We react to things. We don't need to see them all, and that's why we are able to read between the panels the alliterations.
yeah.
This is something we can expect. The typical, Superman opens his shirt. Next thing, Superman is flying. So we don't need to see what's in the middle because our brain fills in the gaps. So I
Yeah.
think pattern recognition are atavic ways. And I still consider. I don't know if you agree, but I still consider, the Altamira or Lascaux, the paintings.
Absolutely.
They're the first comics. They are narrative experiences. When the guy has six spears or four legs. I always tell people it's like that's a guy running and that's a guy shooting arrows or shooting. This is trying to tell you a story. So in a way, for me, those are the first comics in history.
Yeah, I also think it might be funny if they were actual representations of how reality looked back then. Because imagine reality like video games gets more sophisticated through time, and we don't realize it. We're now living in the age of the PlayStation. But if you go back, it gets more simplified. You go back to the Renaissance, they're only discovering perspective. But what if that's before that it didn't look like that?
Uh-huh.
What if that was an upgrade? And what if the further back you go, animals actually looked like that and they were drawing what they saw? Because it was like 8-bit reality. It was the basic code, which our reality is now the beautiful expansion of.
Yeah. No, and also, there's something about our reality that think that's especially the religious people who always think, God made us perfect, blah blah blah. Like, I can tell you many things why not. One of them is our sight. We only see one spectrum, but there's a lot of spectrums of light we cannot see. And of course, our eyes are. I had to have surgery in my eyes because I was cross-eyed when I was a kid. If you were perfect, there wouldn't be corrections in your eyes. You could see underwater. You could see all the spectrums of light.
Yeah.
So there's many things.
But I'll play devil's advocate, David, and say what makes us perfect is that we can imagine all of those things.
Shit. Okay. I'm leaving now. That's also true. But that makes us not. I love what you just said because what we don't see forces us to imagine it, forcing us to make a new reality. Because if
that's our power. That's what will is. That's what magic is. We can imagine something. We can imagine a bridge, and then we build it. And it takes years. It takes moments to imagine something.
Yep.
But it takes years to bring it into reality. But we have that ability. No other animal brings things into reality. Even smart animals like crows who use tools will use what they find and adapt them. We can imagine something that has never been and then make it. So yeah, that's what makes us divine. I think if I was to stand in support of the religious people, I would say we are perfect in the sense that we can imagine things and then make them real. But unfortunately, we tend to imagine a lot of rubbish, and make that real. So we have our flaw, we have the hole in us, that always it leads us towards imagining a lot of crap.
And also from the other side of what you just said, the guys who discovered infrared, ultraviolet, and all that also needed to have an imagination to see there is something there that we don't know. So even that fault gets us to perfection, as you just said, because it makes us find it. It makes us look for the things we don't know, right?
Yeah. And the fact that we can imagine them, what is that? Are we imagining them into being as some esoteric thoughts would say? So the idea that we can imagine something and then make it seems so profound and so meaningful to what we're all about.
Yeah. Also,
that includes making a comic, making a story, having Superman in your head and then having an artist draw it, having Frank quietly put that on a page, having the thing come out and be printed so that people can interact. It's, to me, that's the essence of magic and will and intention.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say, in terms of that, and going back to the language, and it's not only language of comics, it's language in general, the language of creation. We can call it that from now on. We talk about the language of creation. When we are talking about comics, I always say, hello, Einstein, that comics, I think, is the only art that defies. I remember being laughed a lot with this, that defies the theory of relativity. Because
Yeah, yeah.
I think comics is the only art who can defy every notion of time and space. Because you guys, and Scott McCloud told me 2 days ago, it's like, as creators, we are manipulators in comics. We have to be, because we have from the beginning to the end, we have to manipulate the reader's mind to let him see the time, the way, on space, the way we
Yeah.
want. What do you think about that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree with that, and there's so many ways to do that as well. Like, you know, in something like We Three, where Vinny and I we sat and worked out what would it be if the page space wasn't flat.
Mhm.
And no one had really, I mean, a couple of people had probably intuited that. You know, Phil Jimenez did some panels in the Invisibles which are tilted on their side. But there was a real breakthrough to imagine, what if it's not just a flat space that we paste flat images on? What if it's a three-dimensional space that we can rotate images and make them bigger and smaller? So that was a kind of breakthrough, how to use time and space in one way.
Mhm.
Something like Pax Americana, you can contain an entire, and that was inspired by the Zapruder film, the Kennedy film,
Mhm.
which is one slice of time that's just contained, and it's been endlessly studied from every angle, and maps have been made, and bullet trajectories have been drawn out. It's now a space. It's now like a museum space
Yeah.
where everything is frozen in time. So we were trying to create that sense in that comic book where everything was locked and frozen in time, but it all reflected and interacted with each other. And yeah, so there's different ways. The Invisibles is a spiral which is sinking down into a singularity, and story ideas repeat themselves, and motifs repeat themselves tighter and tighter and tighter towards the singularity.
Yeah.
In Doom Patrol, we were able to do like nested stories. So here's a story, and then here's a story inside that story, and inside that. So it was recursive stacks,
Yeah.
which also tied into the way that the Rebus character reproduced. So there's so many ways of representing time and space on a simple comics page.
Yeah.
I mean, it defies all physics. We can shatter physics on those pages and play with parts.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife the other day. I was explaining this thing about the theory relativity in comics, and she's an architect, so she started. You knew Paloma in Glasgow, she started telling me about architecture and all that, and how this thought also works in terms of construction, because in your head, she was telling me, as an architect, you can deconstruct, you can think about things not as you see them on a paper. She had to draw with a pencil in front of La Sagrada Familia, and in her head she was deconstructing the dimensions and then putting it back into dimensions on a paper, making it look like 3 dimensions. So she was telling me, is when you're drawing, you have to think about all the extra dimensions that you really don't see.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. Writing a story, the story's present as a structure in my head, and then the more I tour the structure, the more I rotate the structure, the more detail I start to notice, until finally it seems like something that can be transcribed or written down or copied. But it exists as a structure all the time. There have been times where there are so many orbiting structures inside your head, and you're working on so many projects that it can become almost deranging.
Oh, yes, absolutely. If you're working on 4 at the same time, doing different structures in each one of them, it's like,
I had a point where I was doing 20 projects simultaneously, and that was like moving into the 6th or the 8th dimension, trying to hold them all together.
Well, you just mentioned dimensions. It's also another amazing part of the language. We're theoretically talking about 2 dimensions here, in comics. But many of your work, especially with Vinny, many of work also evolves about define the convention that we have 2 dimensions. Yeah, normally in comics you try to make 2 dimensions into 3. But in your work, it's not like that. Well, it is sometimes when it has to be. But I mean, in many cases, you guys just say there is no. What we said with Scott McCloud the other day, in comics there is really no boundaries, because we keep pushing, and pushing, and there's going to be an next guy and a next guy, and somebody before, and somebody before you, and somebody after you, who's going to say, wait, boundary, I'm going to break it, or I'm going to bend it. We are going to show that comics has no limits. They have no boundaries. So is it always conscious for you to try to break those or bend those boundaries, those limits, or sometimes it just comes, for example, because you're working with Vinny and he's also in his head, he can also make it work.
It's not so much trying to break anything, it's just trying to do something that I've noticed or that I've felt, or some way of thinking that seems to apply to that particular craft. So not so much, let's go in and break the mold. It's not that at all. It's just, how can we say this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's always been, it's been about music, honestly. I'll work on something, I'll work it until it sounds right, until it feels right. And even sometimes it feels right by eliminating a piece of logic that should really be there. And so it can look odd, but to me it's to get a specific sound, it's to create that actual dissonance, it's to make you feel that precise way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all about getting it to sound right, to vibrate properly for me.
Uh-huh.
So it's much more like music, and I don't see it as I also don't see it as finished, which I find strange. My work, apart from something like All-Star Superman, which was very much constructed to be for the ages, all of my work is quite diaristic. I think it's quite of the moment. In every story I look back, I'm working on Invisible's TV show now, and it's a very different thing from the comic book, because for me the comic book was always alive. It was in dialogue with its times. It was never a finished object.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dialogue becomes easy with it, and it's a very different thing. But it's, as I say, it's a dance with that, because for me the work is never finished. I would edit everything eternally.
Mm-hmm. But you just said
I could never sign it in the corner, is what I'm saying. It's never finished. I'll die. I'll die with it unfinished. The sense that it's in motion constantly, all of those stories is very strong for me.
Yeah, and when you were working on the story, for example, you just said a dialogue. Do you in real time? Do you have arguments with your characters? Like just your characters speak back to you. I don't mean literally, of course, but they speak back to you and say,
quite literally. They
yeah, of course. Greg, Rocco.
No, it's weird. It's like what I've honestly found, David, is that the characters speak when you get relaxed and you get into flow. You just hear dialogue, and it's just transcription. It's really like, oh wow, this is so easy, and there's a scene, and there's so often it's not like that, and then you have to fall back on just the craft and what you've learned, and just hard work of making it sound as if those voices were talking. So the voices are kind of a gift. That's when you get in a flow state, and when you're very relaxed and you're really engaged with what you're doing. But a lot of time doing deadline work and doing monthly comic books, you're just not in that state. you have to simulate it by any means possible.
No, I was asking because a month ago I had Greg Raka, and he was telling me, I asked him the same question, and he told me, wow, I have a story about, he had a novel, one of his Atticus Kodiak novels, almost finished. Was like, first act, amazing. Second act, amazing. And said, third act, all the characters started fighting me, saying, no, this is not what I could do. This is not me. And so he had to throw everything away. Have a 2 weeks of a really big mental crisis, a really big block, because he didn't know how to finish it. And then until he decided to throw everything away, stop trying to fight his characters, go back and do the third act, from scratch. And that's when it worked. That's why I was asking if sometimes your characters they'll argue back.
I mean, that can work. That can work, and also sometimes you just have to tell them to shut up and do as they're told.
So sometimes even if they argue, like, it's me who's writing, guys.
Come on, I'm the artist here. I've got shit to say.
Yeah, I have a deadline. Hey, I got a deadline. I gotta finish this.
Stop arguing. We have to send this in 2 hours.
Yeah, we have to send this in. You can argue in the next issue. Come back to me. The next issue. Right now, we cannot do that. So, and when you're starting, is there, when you're starting in a script or a plot or an idea, do you focus on the emotional part first, the character first? Do you focus on the structure, or is just depending on the project or depending what your head asks you for, in any case?
It's always the emotion, but not necessarily the emotion of the characters. It's not about soap opera. For me, the emotion is, like I say, with music. Something happens to me, and I've got to try and deal with it in a story. And it's always that. So every day something's going on, and sometimes it's not extraordinary, and you're trying to deal with something quite simple in a story. Sometimes you have an extraordinary event, like a death in the family, and you're trying to deal with it through the story. So for me, it's always about, can I articulate via these symbols the feeling I've got? So that doesn't mean that Green Lantern has to be weeping over his lost cat. It just means that the whole story has to be about loss and grief, and how do you get over it, and how can Green Lantern enter something like that with all the power and glory that he has and help you through that feeling.
Yeah.
So as I say, if you're in love, then that's in the story. If you're grieving, that's in the story. If you just had a big adventure, that's in the story. And it's about the emotion. It's about, can this be expressed through the music of the story, rather than can this be expressed through a weeping superhero, or something more concrete or literal. So yeah, always the emotion. And then it just goes into drawing, and I do all the what does this look like? What does this look like in my head? Do all the little thumbnail sketches. And then I go in and do dialogue. And even then, I'm sure Vinny told you in your discussion, I'll always go back when the artist has done the work and take out any words that we don't need. With Vinny, so much is conveyed by expression. There's so many artists that work with it. The expressions are enough, so you can take out that little piece of exposition. So I always like to reserve that last pass to do the dialogue in accordance with the art. But that's kind of how it goes. It comes from man, I just fell out with my wife, and I've got to get this out in a story, and you have no idea how that story might turn into Green Lantern 6. No one would ever know the origin of the feeling, but hopefully something of the universality of that feeling comes through.
I see you very dark now, Grant. Okay, that's perfect. You were dark for a second. So, but I love what you just mentioned. So, for you, in a way, the scripts go by the pace of the music in your head.
Yeah.
Because I always think about writing. I haven't done it often. I have published only a couple of things. But I always thought about, when you write, that it should follow the pace, the rhythm of the music, within the tone, in the impression, in the strongest moment has to be like, the big bangs on I don't know, in John Williams' Star Wars, if you know what I mean. In the Imperial March, it's like the bam bam should be your biggest moment in a comic. So do you think in terms of music when you're writing in that?
No, absolutely. It is just music for me, and it's getting the beats, it's getting the rhythm. It's why a certain type of language might be used. It's not necessarily naturalistic dialogue, but it's lyrical dialogue. Hopefully when it's read, it sounds like the lyrics to a song. It sounds like a libretto. And I'd hope that when it works best, that's how it works. It's very much, I'm hearing the beats, I'm hearing the rhythm and the tempo of it. I'm trying my best to match everything to that.
And also,
and that can be different. Even there was one, Chris Burnham and I did a Batman story back in Batman stuff, where it was Kathy Kane, the 50s Batwoman. It was kind of her story. And that one was actually designed as a song. And if you read it, there's the chorus, and then there's there's the verse, and then there's the chorus, and the chorus is where Batwoman comes in. It's told in 3 different time scales, and then there's a middle 8, and the middle 8's done in the style of Alberto Breccia, the Argentinian artist.
Yes.
So the whole thing was designed as a song with intro, outro, and you'll see the way it plays, and that was really deliberate, and no one noticed it. And there's all these circle motifs all the way through it. So things like that can be quite specific and quite obvious, but mostly there's a music or a rhythm in there that isn't maybe as obvious, except when you're reading it.
And now we continue with the music, but the external part. When you're writing, do you have music around, or you just need complete silence, or it depends on the phase of the work? For example, you are just putting your first ideas into paper. The classical, I need to put this in paper, I will forget it moment, or it just depends.
I've always worked to music. Everything I can trace back to music, and so many of my stories have been inspired by specific songs. So yeah, music is always there. I kind of like to listen to stuff that I know well. So I'll listen to the entire catalogue of Momus or something like that endlessly because I know it so well that I can go into a trance.
Yeah.
If it's something new, it tends to bring me out of the work.
Yeah.
So when I'm listening to music, I'll just play stuff over and over again that I know I love. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's always on. It's always been. I can look at all my work and say, that's the records that were playing there. That was the feeling that I was trying to capture in the story.
So that's what I was going to ask too. Do you change the music depending on the mood you want to transmit to the page, or is just as other guys have told me, sometimes they have just progressive rock or psychedelic rock in the back, so they get into a trance in a way, and they just say on a loop. They just until I finish this story for this character or this whatever, same one. I won't change. Then I change character. I won't change the music. How does it work in your case?
Yeah, that happens as well. With Final Crisis, I was listening to Monster Magnet, a lot of heavy kind of psychedelic rock, or with Sea Guy, I was listening to Sid Barrett, and it's much more pastoral kind of music, and so on. A lot of it was just. Luckily, I'm a big fan of Momus, the singer-songwriter from Scotland. And he has a song for every single occasion. So if I feel suicidal, he's got a song. If I feel deliriously happy, he's got a song. If I want to think about, the cultural meaning of something, he's got a song about it. He's written for 35 years, a yearly album about every subject you can imagine. So I'll always just put him on and capture a mood. He was behind the creation of Professor Pig. And just listening to his music has inspired so many songs. So yeah, it depends what the project is. If I want a real driving thing, then I'll put on mindless self-indulgence or something.
No, it's amazing because we're talking about music. Then we were before we were talking about the structure and the emotion. And in a way, I don't believe that phrase that everything in the world is math and the rest, is whatever. But in a way, the pace, the times, the rhythm, where we were talking. Everything is really an exercise of, I am not going to say calculating, but it's an exercise of, measuring. And in most cases, I don't think it's even conscious, right?
No, it's pretty conscious. I don't think it's conscious when you start out, but certainly if you do it for a long time, you have to basically take apart what you do to understand it. So for me, it's very conscious. My work is really constructed. And as you say, it's because we have maybe 22 pages or 120 pages. There's always a specific unit. There's a clock ticking, and you have a story in your head. And it's like, how do I organize the story in my head into this amount of pages? And 22 pages in a monthly comic is quite short. It's quite a short story. But sometimes you have big ideas. You have a lot of stuff you want to pack in there. So everything for me is about organization. It's really, it is mathematical. It's calculated. It's like every count of every panel, how many words in a panel without overwhelming the art. How can I say exactly what I want by cutting out a page of work and condensing that to one panel because I've only got that page. So no, seriously, it's a construction. It's like building a table. The inspiration comes in with the initial drawings and the flash of excitement. But then you have to fit it into that ticking clock. And the ticking clock is always going to be there, and you have to do it in a deadline. You have to do it within that specific number of pages. That is your container, and you can't spill over.
Yeah.
So it becomes mathematical at that point.
Yeah.
If you want to make that work and hit the beats properly and leave people with a sense of rhythm and a sense of finality, then you really have to do the math.
Yeah. Going back to your childhood as a reader, your influences, in many cases, we know the influences that people has, to write comics are comics, but I don't think that's your case. I think, of course, there's some comic writers that were there that influenced you, but what were your influences as a kid? The things that you remember now that even if they are not in your work, or even if they are, you finish something and you realize, I'm lucky I read that when I was a kid because that took me to be able to do this now.
Well, all of it, honestly, like I won I always tell the story. I kind of became a writer when I won a book in a school contest when I was 5 years old. So I'd drawn this picture. They asked us to illustrate Bible scenes. So the first thing I kind of read was the Bible, which, yeah, I'm really glad I read that. That's Jack Kirby. That's Jim Starlin. That's all the stuff I like. You know, that's the root of that and the epic language of the King James Bible. So there was that. But I drew this picture of Samson smiting the Israelites, but I gave him a top hat for some reason, because I just thought he'd look more dapper if he was using his club to beat people's skulls in wearing a top hat. And they gave me this prize of an Enid Blyton book. Enid Blyton was a now problematic author of children's books. And she created the famous 5 and the Secret 7 and you know, the magic faraway tree and stuff that inspired parts of V for Vendetta even. So I read this Enid Blyton book called I think it was called The Ring o' Bells Mystery. And it was the first time, it was a plot, it was a story, there was little illustrations. And it blew me away. I was like, I was inside a world and I was obsessed with miniature worlds and little dioramas and cutouts. And this book was like, oh my God, if I read this, it creates that diorama inside my head. And I'm seeing it in 3 dimensions and all that. But it's a mystery and I love the children and the dog and they're all really cool and they're doing this stuff and they get the bad guy in the end. And so the minute I read that thing, I remember I want to be a writer. And the only other 2 options were cowboy or astronaut. But that was it. I just tried to copy. I tried to and absorb those very basic, you know, classic story structures from when I was a kid. And that was it. And I just been inspired by what I saw on television as well and realizing that was written. And the comics I was reading were written, you know, and I was reading American comics, but also British girls comics because my parents were non-violent activists. And they didn't allow me to read those British boys comics, which were all about the Second World War, you know, going on for the 3rd generation where they were still killing Nazis in these boys' papers way into the 80s. So I wasn't really, it wasn't that I wasn't allowed, I was just discouraged from it and I found them kind of crappy. So I read all the girls' comics and they had a much wider range of material. They had science fiction, they had ghost stories, they had horror stories, they had school stories. And all of that just fed in, you know, all of that's still in. I think it all still comes out, you know, you can still see the mystery story, the Invisibles are just the famous 5, you know, it's like that, it all comes from there, I think. And I always wanted to write for children, which is not so much adults. Although I did, as I said, I wanted to write television plays, but Alan Garner was my big hero. And I just wanted to be like Alan Garner and write these fabulous books for young people. So I feel as if that's always what I've kind of aimed at. The imaginative, clever 14-year-old is my ideal reader ultimately. I'm not really trying to engage with adults.
Yeah. And also, were you a big Marvel or DC guy when you were reading superhero comics, or just
DC completely? I hated Marvel stuff. It just gave me the creeps. When I was a kid, they just seemed super angry all the time, and they were always fighting each other and always moaning about something. And I was just a working class kid. I've had enough crap in my life. So for me, it was the DC guys were friends. They went on picnics, they fought aliens, they got shit done, and they didn't complain, and they were always nice to one another and opened doors for each other. So that was a big deal for me. I like those guys. They just got it done. The Marvel guys were just moan all the time. And I kind of still feel that. I've still got that prejudice today when I read moan superhero comics. I'm just like, this ain't for me. You know, the only joy of these things for me is that they're not real. The world isn't like this. You know, in the real world, everyone is moaning. Everyone's got a reason to moan. I don't need to see Peter Parker doing it. If I'm going to read fiction, I want to see them getting on and imagine what that would be like. You know, what would it be like to be friends with Superman, Batman, and the Flash, rather than fight them.
They're, in a way, they are the DC guys are the icons. You know, the moral gods in a way. You talk about this, you know, several occasions, several outlets. The other ones could be the demigods, you know, Hercules. I always said that if the DC characters are the gods,
elementals, like the Human Torch or Namor, they're kind of personifications of the weather, and of animals like Spider-Man and the Black Panther. They're totemistic in a way that the DC characters are much more like divinities, like the Olympian gods. And like I say, it's not so much that. Also, the thing about the DC characters back then was it was kind of like medieval literature, where the knights of King Arthur's knights would go out and quest, but ultimately they remained kind of the same. That was like psychological realism didn't really come in until Shakespeare or maybe potentially in Chaucer, but they were archetypal characters. So I think that I kind of like that medieval, the hero's the hero, he gets shit done, because to me, trying to pretend that they could be real or to exist in the real world is kind of ridiculous. So the best work that they can do is in the archetypal realm, in the mind. If Superman stands for a fundamental principle, that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's basic. And then if that fundamental principle teams up with that fundamental principle, this happens. And that's the only use that they have, is to act out these kind of internal dramas as symbols. To pretend that they're real at all, or that they would suffer what we suffer, kind of seems to me to miss the point. But at the same time, I know there've been a few good stories like that have explored that angle. But for me, they're only useful as symbolic enactors of our personal dramas.
Yeah, they're the new gods in many ways, while the other ones are the failed demigods. So that people reflect on, because they're teenagers. Well, they were teenagers, now they're in their 40s, but they are teenagers, and they want to reflect on the failing heroes because they can fail. By the end of the day, when superheroes were created, they were the icons we should look up to, right? Like, why?
I think both have their place. I guess I got into Marvel comics in my teens, so you're right. I got into it at the time where I found a bunch of old early Ditko Spider-Man comics, and I hated it when he actually had to go out and fight anyone. I loved when he was in the room sewing his costume and having problems with Aunt May. That was the element of those books that I thought was much more interesting. And I think that's what Stan Lee brought to it, was that particular ingredient. So honestly, all of these things work. It's just I have a particular approach and a particular love of certain things, but my view is not the be all and end all. What I love isn't what everyone loves, and I think it's important that we have this prismatic view. There's so many different ways of doing these characters, so many different ways of thinking about it and what they mean and what they can represent, that I would never shut down any avenue.
Why do you keep coming back to comics after all these years? What's the passion? What keeps the passion ignited? It's as you said. Now you're doing the Green Lantern. It's like, I need to find a character I haven't played with that ignites my passion back. Or in the case, I think Yannick told me that Wonder Woman Earth-1 issue volume 3 is the last one, at least for now. So that's
the last one. It really ends the story. It's very much the last one.
Okay. So this is for you, the igniting the passion with those characters. No, of course, not with your own creations, but with this year is that I need to find one that I haven't played with yet, so I'm able to tell my story with that character. In this case, the Green Lanterns.
No, I get offered things, so I had no intention of doing that comic. But I went out for dinner with Dan DiDeo, and Dan was very good at figuring out how I worked, and he could just suggest something, and he would watch my mind going, and then I would start emitting ideas. So he just kind of said, would you ever do Green Lantern? And I'm like, nah, no, I've got no interest, because I'd like to see it done like this and this and this and this. And then suddenly he said, well, do you want to do Green Lantern? But it was only when Liam came along, and I think, to be honest, this and Wonder Woman became my last big DC superhero project for the foreseeable future. And to just have such brilliant artists, but Liam's stuff has just been spectacular, and to go out on that, it's the collaboration has been one of the most exciting and rewarding that I've had in my entire career. And he keeps pace. In fact, he gets ahead of me. It's like being the drummer in the band, as I've said a lot, and I'm just like keeping time and letting him do his thing, because it's so great. And that's been fantastic to take. It feels relaxing. But the reason I do them is because I just love
That's
I love the fact that I can, like I say, play out my feelings using these huge symbols that everyone recognizes. And, it's like I can enact my dramas using Green Lantern and the whole universe and Sinestro as proxies for, for my feelings. It's just amazing. I love sitting with my books, writing down and designing costumes and working out structures. It's fun, it's the best fun.
And out of you said this is your last big DC projects in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But outside of DC, doing your own personal stuff, are you going to keep doing comics now, or you're too busy with the TV stuff to be able to do to keep doing your own stuff?
No, I've got like 20 new ideas that have been building up for a while, and I really want to spend some time doing those before the grave yawns. There's so many ideas that I think they're all good. So yeah, there's that. The TV stuff's been great fun. I've learned so much from working in that environment. It's been amazing. I'm working on a novel. So yeah, just trying to do as much as possible, as ever. Comics will always be a part of that because, like I say, I just love them so much. I love the creation of comics. I love holding a comic when it's done, and it feels like you put something into the world.
Yeah, in terms of collaboration, in your case, it's really, really obvious, like really, really obvious that you write for your artists. There's other writers who don't. But in your case, it's really obvious. Aside of the fact that you take it back, and then touch things here and there, which I don't think no, especially working with Vinny, I don't think it's possible to do it any other way. You just have to adjust. It's fucking crazy mind. But in a way, when you are writing for, let's say Vinny, let's say Frank, what do you look for? What do you expect to get from him? What is the stuff that you are saying, okay, I know he's the best one at this, so I'm going to push him in this direction? And same with Liam, or same with with any other artist or that you can imagine right now.
Well, with Vinny, it's just the understanding that he has a connection with me, that he seems to be able to depict my dreams and my ideas in a way that is very high fidelity to the original. And a lot of my stuff is about body language and nuance and eye contact. And the more I can take out the words, the happier I am, which was, a big part of what We Three was as well. So he has a mathematical brain that allows him to play those kind of tricks, and he'll do it in such a precise way. He knows what he's doing. It's very precise. Like I say, it's like a simulation. It's almost three-dimensional. You can imagine looking around the corners in a Vinny drawing, the city's still there, and you can see things off in the distance and feel that you could walk through his environment. So there's that. I think it's funny because I find myself reaching the limits of what I say about this. It's much more we're in tune in a way that I can't quite articulate, but it involves those very simple ideas, But there's more to it than that. We've had adventures together, we've hung out together, we've seen each other's worst moments and best moments, and there's just a kind of sync that you get into, a kind of third mind that emerges, again, a holographic thing that emerges when two minds really get into a close harmony.
Yeah, and with
different ways with different artists, like Yannick with the Wonder Woman stuff's just amazing. Liam's been amazing, but it's all very different ways of interacting. With me and Vin, we're super close. We're good friends, and we have been for a while.
I have to ask about, since he mentioned it last week, how it was for you to work with Jill.
With who?
Jill Thompson.
Who?
Jill Thompson.
Oh, Jill. Sorry, man. I didn't hear you there. Cool. How was it to work with Jill? It was great. I mean, the Invisibles came out of the whole experience when Jill and Steve Yoel and I went on this tour of America, and we wound up in San Francisco, and it was the 50 years of LSD celebrations that night. So we all trooped down there with Tom Peyer and Stuart Moore, and everyone was just tripping on ecstasy that night, and it was intense. So out of that came the Invisibles, you know. And I just remember like being in the hotel and Steve's giving me a massage, you know, like kind of groaning, no idea what happened. And the next day we all went down to San Francisco Park and were pinning flowers in Stuart Moore's hair and Tom Pyre's hair. So it was it was a magical birth. And the Invisibles grew out of that. And then I'm sure, as Jill told you, she came over to Britain and she participated in this big 2000 AD Love-In we had on stage. And we had everyone, we brought all the audience onto the stage, except for a few holdouts who just sat in the darkness. And we bought champagne for everyone. Me and Mark Miller kind of just went out. We got like £300 together and bought champagne for all the audience and sat on stage in a pile of flowers. So I actually have all this stuff on film. And one day I'm going to get it out there. And I've got the whole story Jill told with us up in the mountain doing mushrooms. That's all filmed. It's really beautiful and elegiac with the sunset over the mountains. And we're all like dressed like romantic poets. It's kind of great.
I want to see that.
Yes, it's all there. I used to film and document everything. So I've got all the comic conventions and backstage with young Garth Ennis.
Did you film her on the floor of your house?
No, I missed that. But like she said, she just passed out and I kind of left her. You know, I thought she'll be fine.
Okay.
And the cats had covered her like a blanket. She was cool.
She was alive. At least we know she was alive because she's still here. Okay, let me see. Let's go with people. We are not ignoring you guys, so let me see what they say. I probably is a lot of praise for you and then some questions. So let's start. Comics Tomos Igrapa says, loving the great Scott. That's for you. Congratulations to David, to me because of my birthday. Thank you.
Oh yes, your birthday. Happy birthday, David. Nice.
You're my birthday gift, my friend. So I'm happy. Thank you so much.
26 today.
What?
26 today.
26, yes. The other extra 20 I just tossed aside. That's 26. You know, the guys, forget about it. Not 46, 26. Grant said it. That's the law. I will accept it. Okay. Daniel Baldosa, this is fucking awesome. Grant is here. Okay. Juan Torres asks, did anybody? He's a joke, of course. When you published it, did anybody aside of you and Frank understood Flex Mentallo?
Yeah, loads of people understood. It was pretty easy. It was just a guy having hallucinations while trying to kill himself. So yeah, I mean, some people didn't get it, and lots of people did. Such is the way of things.
Okay, yes. Lucas Grizzly said, salutations for Festivo Comics. If Grant says hello, I have a dream. It's a dream for me. So she's asking you to say hello, Festivo Comics.
Oh, hello, Festivo Comics. Take care.
Okay. Grant, Pedro Mesa says, Grant, you're my favorite comic book writer. Thank you for being here. Paula Ventimiglia, everybody says they are all here with the whiskey in their hand. Guys, I am asking for questions, not for you to tell me you're drunk. Let me see. Emotion hearing here. Agustin Miranda says this is a big emotion, being here and being able to listen to Grant. He's my favorite writer. My head exploded. He's made my head explode with everything he's written. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks for reading, man. That makes it worthwhile.
So Eduardo says this is an impressive gift you're giving us on your birthday. Yes, it is. He is the gift. It's not me. This year, I'm ignoring all of those. Blah blah blah. Great. Thank you for I'm ignoring everything that is related to my birthday. I mean, thank you for Doom Patrol, Flex Mentallo, Multiverse, and many others of your book. They changed my life. Lucas Grizzly said.
You're welcome. I hope they changed it for the best.
I kind of believe he meant that. Yeah. Let me see. Okay, Germán Amplio Duran. Why are comics so? Finally, a question. Germán Amplio Duran says, "Why are comics so tied to magic? There are many more works than works of art that speak of it, not always directly, in any other mediums. But why are so many authors have declared the interest in the subject in the comics field?
I think it's basically that the very art form is an expression of magic. You know, the original god of magic in all our cultures, it's Thoth, or it's Odin, or it's Ganesh in India. That these characters all share a certain approach to the world, which is a speed, a communication, a tricksterish nature. And comics are a really good embodiment of that god, you know. So if we look at it as Odin, or comics come out on a Wednesday, you know. To me, there's a lot of my stuff, like the Multiversity, in that comic, Nick's Wotan is a representative of that spirit, you know, that spirit of speed and communication that we call Mercury, or sometimes the Flash, or sometimes Metron, or sometimes Hermes. But ultimately, it's an expression of human communication and language itself, and how it works. And language can be used to trick people, and yet language can be used for magic. So I think comics have an inbuilt thing. You know, it's why there's the lightning bolt, which is the motif of that god, of Hermes, of Mercury, the lightning bolt of Wotan, of Woden, or Odin. The lightning bolt appears in so many major comic characters like Flash, Captain Marvel. You know, the Fantastic Four opens with the sudden fury of a thunderbolt. This idea of electricity and the divine, the touching of the divine by creating little worlds that are, you know, in ink and words, and then manipulating them. I think it just relates so closely to magic that there's no escape, and I think it's why it's attracted so many people, like you say, like me, or Alan Moore, or Pat Mills, or, you know, Pete Milligan. So many people have genuine interest or are practitioners of magic in one way or another. Yeah. And I think that they're drawn to this form because it naturally has an affinity with that lightning bolt, that speed spirit, that spirit of communication and language and deception and showbiz.
But it's also, as we said before, making I think that making two dimensions into as many as you think, and the manipulation in time and space, that's also magic, right? You know, I mean, Arthur C. Clarke said, you know, any advanced technology that we don't understand, it really is magic. It's not about the mystical, as you said. It's about the things that we don't understand that we want to make sense of. It's creating magic for us to be able to get it, right?
Yeah, it's not a supernatural thing, and it's actually so much a part of our experience that we kind of forget that. You know, we're so used to seeing magicians on screen who are like Gandalf or Dumbledore, or, you know, they wield wands and they fire electricity out their fingers. And I've had people say to me, well, you're not a magician if you can't fire electricity. And, you know, as I've said, that's like expecting a working policeman to be John McClane from Die Hard. You know, these are fantasy figures on television. They relate to magic in the same way that John McClane relates to actual real life law enforcement.
Yeah.
The fantasies, you know, and real magic is just part of the human experience. Like I say, it's about paying attention. It's about paying attention to patterns. It's about paying attention to the way things work. You know, back in the day, and back in Egypt, you could be seen as a prophet because you knew when the Nile would rise up, and you knew when the Nile would go down and it would get dry. The Pharaoh might have seen that as a magical ability, but all that is, as you say, pattern recognition. You're watching the Nile's behavior over time and paying attention, writing it down, and then you can kind of predict. So magic is part of the human experience. It's not about the supernatural. It's not about any of that. It's about interacting with your environment in a very focused and attentive way. And sometimes when you do that in the way that, if we look at a great martial artist or a great dancer or a great artist, it can look like magic. Yeah. But no, it's the result of attention and paying attention over a long period of time and giving yourself over to a particular task until it becomes, like I say, it's that dance occurs where you're really interacting in the world in a way that looks to other people supernatural, that looks like magic. Yeah. But we can all do it. It's not, this isn't for magi or for the, it's just being confused with other things. And it's really about reminding people anything you can think you can make happen, that's magic. That's the basic. You can make faster than light ships, you know, you can make, we already got tricorders and you know, Star Trek phones. We just need faster than light vehicles and a world federation. It's like, we can imagine that we can make it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna add, which is every process of creation, in a way, every single one is magic. You create
Yeah.
things from they are not there. You create them.
From
You make them
nothing to something.
exactly. You make them real from your head
Mhm.
to the paper or what or whatever space. I don't care if it's comics or music. The Sergeant Pepper's, for example. I may not be a huge fan of the Beatles, but Sergeant Pepper's for me that album is magic. It's
Yeah.
something that the moment I heard it for the first time, I was like, boom! How did they do this? You know what I mean?
And it didn't exist until they got together to bring it from their imaginations into reality. And
Yeah,
the way to do that is to interact with matter, to work with the material universe. And
yes,
if you can work with it really well, and if you have skills and you learn your thing, you can do amazing things. But it only works. Our imagination is useless unless it can cross the abyss into the material universe, where we can then bring it into life. We can mold it. We can make records. We can make comic books. We can paint paintings and actually depict internal states that didn't exist with weight and measure prior to that.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that is magic. That's the ultimate secret of magic, and everyone can do it.
Absolutely. And that magic, as I said, the tricorder takes us to Steve Jobs or any other Apple, I don't care, to do the iPhone or the iPad. And then
Mhm.
everything is based on the imagination of somebody that somebody else then is making to reality. I just said we don't have faster than light, or we don't have wormholes, but people saw the wormholes in Contact, or they saw the faster than light in in Star Wars or Star Trek.
Yeah,
That makes us. Neil deGrasse Tyson said a lot of times is seeing those things made me want an astrophysicist. That's what
yeah.
made me want to understand and want to create it. So your imagination, creators, writers, imagination, artists, imaginations, is why by the end of the day creates new scientists.
And also everyone's imagination. I mean, never forget, a young couple can imagine a baby and bring it into being, bring another human being
Yeah.
by just imagining it, by deciding that. That's again, these are acts of magic. It's all magic. Baking a cake is magic. And if we remembered that, we could get better at it,
Mhm.
and try things that we maybe haven't tried. And again, it's what, as I say, some people can do things with it that seem supernatural,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they are not supernatural. They are attention and practice.
But they're magic anyway.
Of course, because that's how magic expresses itself. That's how thought expresses itself in matter through time. It
Exactly.
needs time. You can imagine a bridge. That's what I love about Green Lantern. He can imagine a bridge and then make it appear instantly.
Yeah.
But as a Bard Kingdom, Brunel imagined the bridge and then had to hire people and had to make the blueprints, but he still wound up with a solid bridge that still exists today.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's imposing the will and the imagination onto the very material substrate of reality.
Well, that's also your work in a way as a writer, imposing your will on the words, on the
Yeah,
images, on the because you still do that, right? When
yeah,
you're
yeah,
so I guess that you're imposing your will on everything that is crossing your mind. Like as you said, the 20 different projects, and you have to impose your will on this is what I need in this one. This is the magic I need to become matter.
yeah. These are all the ingredients. This is the eye of Toad and the leg of Newt that needs to go into this specific project to bring it from the imagination into at least a misshapen version of what you first dreamed of, but it's still there. It exists. It can be held. A
Mhm.
thought can now be held. You know, that's amazing to me.
Okay, let me see. Yes, Pedro de Mercader. Hello, everyone. I could do a trillion questions. Please don't. But I want to ask you if you think that comics, but I want to ask you, you think that comics and culture have turned less subversive? In other words, do you think punk is dead?
I mean, no, these things don't die. They just go underground and they'll turn up again with another generation with a different name. Comics right now, though, I think are quite conservative. I have to say that when I came up in the 80s, it was very much an arena for counterculture types, like unemployed working class kids like me and Alan Moore, Pete Milligan, and Brendan McCarthy, the people that I knew, Mark Miller. And we were kind of the counterculture. As I say, all of us were involved in bands or involved in performance in some way or other, involved in poetry slams. I think a lot of the people who work in comics now are teachers or, like Tom King's a CIA agent.
Yeah.
There's a more, and I wouldn't put these people down by saying this, but I think there's a more careerist approach to comics now than there was when we came in.
Yeah.
We didn't. We saw it as something we could build from the ground. I think people are coming in now to the structure that was built and working within that. So I think there's been a move from the counterculture to the culture, working in comics and creating comics. And that's not to say that's bad or good. It's just it's the way it's been, and I think the flavour that we brought to it is probably not there anymore, except as an echo from people who enjoyed what we did.
Yeah.
And there will probably have to be a new iteration of what you want to call punk, or just that spirit of energy and possibility that was around then.
Yeah.
And probably a certain generation of people who have needs that are met by that are different and more. But I don't know where the counterculture is now, if such a thing exists even. I certainly was aware of it back then when we were making our own records and fanzines and very much in opposition to the mainstream. But now I think most people want to engage with the mainstream, which is fine in itself, but as I say, it adds a very different flavour to what you read now.
And it also is, as you said, a generational thing, because every action has an opposite reaction. So if we have this now, punk, as you said, in any other name, the name doesn't matter, it's the fact.
Yeah.
It's going to come back again to say, you know what, I'm fucking against that mainstream. We need to fight it. We need to do the opposite. As the underground came, and then there was somebody who said, "Oh no, Crump is not true," but people thought Robert Crump is the mainstream, so something different. You know what I mean? Even
but now the punk of today would be holding up someone like Robert Crumb as an unacceptable expression of views that are no longer considered, proper in a civilized society.
Yeah.
So the punk can be opposite as well. It can have an opposite valency. It can be judgmental, or it can be accepting. But there's always an edge. There's always people out there who are defining how the general culture feels at any given time, and what direction it's taking, and what people feel they're capable of doing within it.
For me, punk, it's going to be sound maybe crazy to you, but for me, punk right now in comics are the female creators who are breaking the limits of what people think comic can sell. It's Tilly Walden, it's Raina Tegelmeier, it's Noelle Stevenson, it's those ones who are saying, I can do 200-page books, I can do 2 a year, I'm going to sell 1 million comics. You told me comics don't sell? Boom. Now, for me,
they don't sell to old dudes. Yeah, they don't sell to old dudes who read Marvel and DC. But comics sell. People love comics. The form always works, and I agree with what you're saying. And it's like the best television drama that I've seen in decades was Michaela Cole's "I May Destroy You," which was just a 12-episode series on that just ran in the UK recently, and it's amazing. It's technically brilliant. It's even Rich Johnson the other day compared it to Watchmen, but it really is. It's on the level of this perfectly constructed, beautiful drama, which is all about the modern world, which is about the experience of young women, specifically young Black women, but it's also about everything. It's about all our lives. It's about love and grief and loss and taking drugs, and it was astonishing. So that to me is the same spirit again, and again it's the female spirit. It's like, I'm glad to be, I'm old and I'm backing out of it. And Wonder Woman's my kind of, okay, that's me saying.
You are not all, as I know, we're vintage.
Yeah, so I think that and what you're saying, but the excitement I've found, the cultural excitement is coming from these places. Like you say, it's coming from young women just saying things that they haven't been able to say for a long time, and it's fresh, and it seems challenging, and it rocks you on your heels and makes you think, which is what it should be. That's punk rock.
That's what I was saying. For me, that's punk, because it goes against every. This is comics. This is how it has to work. This is what sells. This doesn't. And then those women coming and like boom on the table. This is the sales. Tell me comics. Tell me women can do comics. Tell me the comics don't sell. Tell me we cannot do in American comics. Nobody's gonna buy 200 or 300-page comics. What? There it is. Everything is going against convention. So what they're doing, and I was talking to Scott McCloud now, it's like, I'm so glad because those creators are creating behind them a next generation of creators, of females or males, but especially females, that now know, you know what, you can do it.
Yeah.
They told you can. Now we are showing you can. Come over, join us, come over. And even
that's yeah.
the
That's all it ever takes. Someone to blaze a trail, someone to open the doors and to inspire people, and you'll get a generation, a fabulous, flaming generation of brilliance.
Yeah, and as I told some of the Spanish, I have some Spanish young creators, in one of these panels here. One is trans, the other is bi, the other one is lesbian. And they were just, frustrated about some things. And my answer was just, you are the future. Stop.
Mhm.
You are the future. They can't stop you. They think they can stop you. That's why they yell. That's why they protest. And there are 5 guys. They can't stop the future. Sooner or later, you're going to be looking at them from above, and they are going to be nothing. Because you bring magic, and you bring imagination, and you bring power. You empower kids who thought they didn't have the power because you're there. Just because you're there, and they can look up and say and see you.
And that should inspire everyone. That brings new blood, that brings new vision, it brings new ideas to everything. It invigorates culture, and it brings culture to life. It's not about killing one thing to give another dominance. That again, that's the old boy god, the hero king that you have to destroy in order to take over. This is not about that. This is about accommodating everything, about recognizing things and finding new ways, like capillary, spread out. The culture needs invigoration. It needs all of it. It needs to consider everything that it's doing, and hear all the voices, and hear where it's going wrong, hear where the machine isn't working, learn from it.
Yeah, and everything is not that everything can coexist, is that it must coexist. We need superheroes for a certain audience, but we need those female bosses for a certain. We need a slice of life. We need the Hernandez brothers, if you know what I mean.
How do we understand the complex, prismatic, multi-dimensional thing that is our lives unless we can try and see it from every perspective, even the ones we don't agree with, even the perspectives that have been proven wrong by history? We still, someone is seeing the world that way. We need to understand how it all fits together. What are we looking at that looks so different from all these different viewpoints?
Yeah.
Like the blind men and the elephant. What are we actually looking at? And I feel the wider perspective is always more helpful there. The more we can see, the more we can understand, the better we have of grasping this complex object that is our lives, that is our existence in space and time.
No, absolutely. If we want culture to reflect reality, it's got to be the widest possible. It's got to have a huge amount of different perspectives that helps us add the pieces to create a whole, right?
Yeah, and to understand how someone might think, and to understand how they could have got to that, whether you agree or not, to see why, to get the mechanics of that. And the mechanics usually stretch back into those systems, that have gone weird in the dark. So I think it's all, like I say, for me, it's always useful to understand the whole thing, to try and avoid the cytokine storm of opposition and division.
Let me see. Next one. Okay, Javier Merino asks, translate on the fly, this is in Spanish. One question. I have interest in knowing what's your process from the moment you have an idea until you have a final script.
Just kind of like what I said, it'll come as an idea, an emotion. Then I have to find a way to break it down into images. And then I'll add my little bits of dialogue. And then the script is obviously a complete description of every panel and what's in it and what seems important. And that goes to the artist. And then the artist is able to use that information to develop their own version of the story that I'm trying to tell. And when it works in a spectacular, unusual and edifying manner.
That's one question I have to think, because I remember Beanie telling me 2 weeks ago about when you told him about We Three, and his reaction was really funny. Why? Why did We Three come to your head? What was that moment when you're like, I have to tell that story?
No, it's weird. It came from a completely odd source. back in the late 90s, in the Vertigo days. I think it was Shelley Bond sent me some sketches. It was basically to look at new artists or projects. And there were sketches, and there was 3 like assassins in suits, but they were wearing helmets. That was it. It was just nothing. It was just a picture of assassins in suits, like kind of, like Quentin Tarantino kind of guys, but wearing these helmets. And I had this image of what would happen if the helmet came down. It was just this frightened dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in my head for a while, and then I remember in a Chinese restaurant, I was sitting with Kristen, and suddenly the whole thing came of just these little animals running, burdened by the suits that they were wearing, but burdened more by the fact that they'd been used as killers, as assassins. And that was it. And I just heard "Run, Bandit, Run," and that was it. And it developed from there. And I just thought, well, this is great. This is like, the Homeward Bound. This is like, the fantastic journey, whatever, the incredible journey meets Terminator. This is a great kind of movie. I just imagine Spielberg doing something with this. And it was red and it was shiny. I get things almost synesthesia, where the idea was red and it was shiny like a Ferrari. So I knew it was a good one. And out of that, it really came quite easily once I got the opening scene of the man running on the treadmill, the politics, the pointlessness of human life, the treadmill like an animal, and the characters coming in. And it just developed. And then talking about it to Vinny came the notion of doing these exploded panel sequences and treating the page space as 3-dimensional rather than 2-dimensional. And it developed from there. And it was just really exciting. It felt like we were doing something quite different and new with comics. And because the story was so simple, it really allowed us to kind of go to town with the effects and the graphic ideas that we had.
How challenging it was for you to make that multi-dimensional idea work on as a final product?
Once I had it, it was easy. I've got notebooks where it's all the different things you could do, and we only used some of them. And we used some more of those ideas when we did the Robbie Williams tarot cards. If you look at that, there's a lot of the dimensional rotations in there, and using the panel plane to represent different dimensions. So we did it with that and that. But yeah, like I say, once the idea was there, it became, oh my God, you could do this, you could do this. So and like I say, I've got a whole notebook of possibilities for that. But no one really picked up on it. It was weird. It probably requires too much concentration, too much mathematics.
Let me see. And Oscar Silence Dead asks, any advice for writers when they're stuck? I guess he means if you have a writer's block.
Well, it's hard because I've never really had writer's block, and I know what it's like to not want to do something, but that's different. Sometimes you just can't be asked, and you have to force yourself. Honestly, the honest truth for me is to have a deadline, to actually be doing it for a reason. Because back when I was young and I didn't do this as a job, I could never finish anything. I've got all these fabulous unfinished comics and drawings, but I would always move on to the next thing. And it's only the paycheck and the deadline that actually forced me to complete stuff. And it's the only reason I've got a shelf full of books, that I'd never finished any of those if I didn't know that it was a job. So unfortunately for me, that's probably the big stick. And I don't know what it's like. If you're earning money from your work, then you're going to have to do it. If you're trying to do it just on your own and get better and learn, then just keep practicing and don't finish things. And if you've got a block, just do automatic writing. Do anything. Just do mad stuff. Just don't do what you should be doing, and your mind will kick into gear, and you'll go back to what you want to do.
Yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz was asked the same question a few weeks ago, and he literally said, "I just walk through it. I don't let it stop me.
Well,
I have to do it."
That's what you do when you're earning money and you know you've got a job and you have to work through it. There's just no getting away from it. You have to sit down, even if you're tired. All the gears of your brain are grinding against this. You've got to do it. But it's much harder if you're just trying to do your own stuff and be self-motivated. So that just involves a lot of little tricks.
And the guy who asked about We3 was asking also, Javier Merino, was it any different for you, the creative process for a project like Pax Americana? Was it any different than the creative process for We3?
Oh, totally. They were just completely different things. Pax Americana was very two-dimensional, it was very flat on the page, because again, it was about that. You know, Captain Atom talks about reading the comic, and there's this simulation of a comic inside the comic while he's reading. So that one was a lot flatter, and we were doing tricks with time that were very different from We 3, because We 3 was about animal perception, about animal movement. So we were really thinking it from a different headspace. So Pax Americana, I think, is much more. It's much more literal in the storytelling, and it's very much about representing time on this two-dimensional space, and the fact that you can hold the entire sequence in your hand and go backwards and forwards through it. Like I say, like the Zapruder footage, it's flat. You know, you can't. The dimensionality is added by your participation in that one.
In a way, We 3 was more about space, and Pax Americana was more about time.
Yeah, and it was We3's freer as well. You know, once the animals get out of that grid with the cameras, it opens up into that beautiful double page, and then it's much freer. The layouts explode; they become animals rather than the stratified, the human perspective. But Pax is very much the human perspective, and it's also based around the eights. So, you know, we took the Watchmen 9 grid and did this kind of unstable. But if you look at the panels, it's the two towers. You know, it's meant to be this post 9/11 thing, and it's also, you know, there's a lot of slicing of time, but it's all to do with this kind of toppling effect that you get, and the sense of time being unsteady. But at the same time, you have it all in your hands, and you can go back forward. You can see the inevitable horror. You can rewind back to, does he have a plan here? Is this going to work? And so, yeah, that was very much about time. It's very much about how you experience time in that book, and We 3 is about how the animals experience their progress.
Let me see. Can Comics says, as a praise for you, what I like the most about Morrison is the positivism he always has in his comics, despite of telling you in many occasions dark and crude stories.
Yeah, well, you know, the world tells you dark and cruel stories all the time, but I find that the best way to deal with it is with a grin and a joke. But again, you know, it's easy for me. I've done okay, and I love to do, and I live in a nice part of the world, so it's easy to be upbeat. But generally, I'm quite a depressive, downbeat person. So again, I have to motivate myself. It's all about the work. If I can get the feelings out, then I feel great.
Let me see.
I do think it's important to just emphasize the best to people. I mean, you know, it can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. By the end of the day, we see enough on the news of the worst part of people. So as creators, in a way,
it's horrible, but you can create what, you know, Hacking Bay called temporary autonomous zones within it, which are zones created by your own imagination and your own interests and your own relationships, and you can kind of exist in a little bubble sometimes and avoid it. And that's the best thing that I think we can do, is to try and create these little zones and be as kind or productive as we can within the small zones. You know, I'm not about changing the world. The world's too big. There's 7.5 billion people, and they're not all going to say yes to me. But you can make a difference within that space, the temporary autonomous zone, the space of influence, where you can look after the animals, you can help local people, you can do all that stuff. And the more of us do that, the more the network of that is in existence. So that would be it. You know, I think it's important to be positive, because everything else is negative.
Yeah.
And we have to use our imaginations to think of different ways, even if they won't work, even if we're truly living on the planet of the apes controlled by sociopathic old men. We still have imaginations, you know, and we can still have that little space.
Yeah, and we can create as creators a temporary, even if it's just temporary, a bubble to get us from the sickness of the world, from the sickness. And I don't mean the pandemic. I mean the general sickness that was there.
And make connections, you know, like artwork or doing things like this, making connections across the world. Someone picks up that comic and connects with it. Even if they drive them nuts and they don't understand it, they've got something's happened, and the people who really get into it, you know, they realise that there's other people who think like them out there, and that's very important.
Yeah, it's taking them off the daily grind, abstracting from the reality, to get them into your world. In your case, the world you and Vinny or Liam or any other, it's like get coming. I think the best thing you guys have as creators is like, I'm inviting you to my world. Come in, come in, come in, and enjoy my the fruits of my brain in a way.
Yeah,
Or have
and I
a
think you also, I think you owe it to those people to have a nice place. I think you owe it to them that when you come in here, we'll try and we'll try and be positive. We'll try and educate. We'll try and say things that are useful. We'll try and emphasize the better aspects of human nature over the worst, while still trying to acknowledge the worst. And I guess superhero comics are great for that. You can have dark side. You can have light ray, they're very primal in dealing with those feelings. So that's useful to me. It's like if you're coming in here, then order and harmony are almost guaranteed. So it's a little escape from everything else.
yeah, but you're always going to give them the duality, right? The duality of the balance, yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. The duality is always going to go there. It's like, coming, yes, I'll show you darkness, but I will always show you. At least that's what something I always saw in your work. It's like, by the end of that tunnel, I am always going to show you the path to the light. Whether you want to take it or not, that's up to you. But I'm going to try to show you that path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the darkness must be acknowledged, or else it's not being helpful. You have to acknowledge the worst feelings, the darkest aspects of human nature. But at the same time, all you're saying is, can we use our imagination to think around them? And even if that imagination, how would Superman do it? How would the Flash do it? How would this particular character do it? Then it's using your imagination to think around problems, and maybe someone will think in a way that saves us all. Maybe someone will be triggered by that little notion to come up with the idea that changes everything. So I think it's just using imagination to outwit the devil. It's fun, that's what it's for. Outwit the devil. Okay, you do this,
playing with it's like
you change into a porcupine, I'll change into I'll change into a lake.
I love that part about playing with the devil, always on the verge, but always working around him.
Yeah,
how
he loves having debate. He loves word games. So I think
the other guy doesn't like debate as much. The devil, the other guy doesn't like debate as much. The devil always like to let's play, let's have fun.
He loves it. He loves it, and that's his weakness.
Okay, let's go. How Felipe Gonzalez asks, how did you make up your run on Doom Patrol? For me, it was amazing and a love letter to Drake and Premiani original comic book. And also, second question, what do you think about the Doom Patrol TV show?
Well, I haven't seen the show, so I've no idea. I've heard it's pretty good and it's quite faithful to the comics, and it's. I spoke to a couple of the actors before the show, so yeah, I mean, I've heard it's good. Haven't seen it. The comic just came about. I was offered to take up this comic because Paul Kupperberg was leaving, and I looked at the title, "The World's Strangest Superheroes," and then thought, well, what would that mean? I mean, I should take this seriously. All the jobs about what's the core of this, what's the most important thing about this. And I thought, well, if it's the world's strangest superheroes, it should be strange. I should be pulling from the fringe stuff, from surrealism, from Cocteau, from fringe science, from all kinds of stuff that wasn't really in the mainstream at that time. And at the same time, it was about me and my friends kind of being an outsider and being a kind of arty crowd where everyone was a little bit mental. So the Doom Patrol, I thought, the Justice League is a kind of, the Justice League is like the United Nations, the Avengers is a football team, the Fantastic Four is a family, the X-Men is a school. So what are the Doom Patrol? And I thought, well, the Doom Patrol is a therapy group, and it's for the world's strangest superheroes. And out of that grew the structure of it and the kind of characters that would be in it, and also the kind of menaces they would face, which was menaces born of unreason and the unconscious of civilization. So all of that stuff, I mean, when I was doing that, I was totally straight edge. I wasn't doing drugs or anything. I wasn't drinking. I didn't drink coffee. I just drank water. So the Doom Patrol was all about stuff from my dreams. And I used to keep these dream diaries, and I've done all these kind of automatic writing experiments and sealed writing and all kinds of stuff to just generate stuff from the unconscious and see what I could get. And I built it all around that. So it became a big confrontation with the unconscious, these dark authority figures that could be expressed through really quite bizarre imagery. And Richard Case just played along, you know, he just was there for everything and ready to depict any insane thing I just had in a dream the night before. You know, the Pale Police, oh my God, I'll write it down and they go in the comic. So it was all about that. It was all about dreams and the unconscious, but also doing that in the context of a Fantastic Four type superhero title, where they were up against, you know, even if it was something the D creator, well, it's real Galactus, you know. They're doing the same kind of thing that you used to see in superheroes do, but they would outwit them in more surrealistic or abstract and non sequitur ways. And again, that was the flavour of it, you know, and I was reading a lot of kind of philosophical stuff and postmodern thought. So it was all just pouring in there, and that became what the Doom Patrol was. That was the stew in the cauldron, because it needed the strangeness of it needed to be amplified.
Yeah, but because to be honest, is there any other way you can tell a Doom Patrol story and make it work?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I had my go, and that's what I did. So, but I think we worked it out really well. I think they're a therapy group. They're broken people, but they're trying really hard, and I think that makes them very lovable. That's always been work. They're underdogs. They're the crappy superheroes. They don't even. They're just people who've had accidents happen to them that make them seem a little bit like superheroes. And anyone using that take on them, I think it gives them a kind of, like I say, a lovability.
No, that's what we're.
We want them to win. We've all felt like the underdog. We've all felt stupid and ugly and pointless, and they kind of get shit done, and they take on the things that the other superheroes are too straight to deal with.
Yeah.
So I think that there's always, if you want to do the Doom Patrol, there has to be some element of that, I think, because that's what makes them special.
Yeah, that's why the TV show works so well. I've watched season 1, not season 2 yet, and it's pure you, literally. It's pure you. It's the stuff you did. No,
yeah, well, I mean, it's a kind of adaptation of a lot of those stories. You know? I know what an adaptation is because I just did Brave New World. So you add stuff, you make it, you tidy it up, you clean it up for television, but it's still an adaptation of the stories, and I'm glad that's how to do it, and I'm glad they've done it. I'm glad there's a show on TV that's like that, and it's it has all these great queer characters, and it's about something different than Captain America.
Yeah, absolutely. No. This one is, as I said, very faithful to your stuff. I didn't know if they were going to go that way, but when I saw it, I loved it. I would just like to see that. This is me saying it, not him. I would just like to see your name and Richards on the credits. That's it.
Yeah, I think that would have been a nice idea. It would have been a nice idea. You know, we made things easy for the production staff.
Okay, Chris Noth asks, question for Mr. Morrison. I hope it's for him, not for me. Are you working on some new creator-owned projects in comics? And if so, can you tell us anything about them and who the artist would be?
No, there's nothing that close to happening right now. So yeah, I've got like 20 new ideas which I spoke about that I think are really, really exciting and different and new. They're all very different, but nothing has progressed beyond that. I haven't assigned any artists or talked to anyone yet. But yeah, there are things in the pipeline, but I don't know how long it'll take. Like I say, I'm doing the television stuff just now. It's a lot of fun, and I'm doing the book. You're kind of probably next year before I start on any other comics.
You're kind of busy. Let's say it. You're kind of busy with the TV stuff, right?
Yeah, well, it's not as busy as I've been. Like when I was doing Batman, and I was doing the Return of Bruce Wayne, and I was doing it was like 10 comics, and Final Crisis, and all these things. That was busy. That was like having a breakdown where I would just get up at 9 in the morning and work till 9 in the evening or 10, just every single day. So this is fun. You know, I've got just enough work, and it's absorbing enough. And I do like I say, I love to edit and I love to go over things. So it's fun to work in television. You're doing drafts and making it better. Comics are all like one draft.
Yes.
And it's a good skill to have, but there's I'm really enjoying the craft thing, just making something better and better.
That's what I was going to ask, because the transition for you from comics 1 or 2 drafts, and then go, because we have a deadline, it's a monthly, we gotta go, we gotta go, with the exception of Wonder Woman Year One or other projects in a way. Year One, sorry, Earth One. In this, it's a completely different frame of mind, right? You have to do more and more and more, and the language is also different. So how it's been for you to adapt your brain and the way you work to that medium?
It took a little while, but being in writers' rooms with some really good writers and seeing how other people did it, once you learn it, it's just a language. And once I learned the language, I really love it. It's just another way of getting thought down onto the page, and but also thinking about how people say this and how will music affect this. So it's different, and the fact that it's more collaborative has been interesting as well, because in comics it's so pure. It's like poetry, I write stuff and it just goes on the page. There's no editing. There's no, just as it is. But in movies and in television, obviously there's a process of notes, and I have to say, in every case, it's made it better. It's really so. I like that, being able to go back and reconsider something and think, oh, you've missed out that strand, or you need to play up that character, or focus on that, and suddenly every little piece of it gets polished, and you're aiming towards a Citizen Kane level of every scene has to be really good, every scene has to be different, everything. So I kind of like that. I feel although the scripts that I write will probably be completely different by the time they reach the screen, which is what happens. It's the process has been really fun. I think it's just making me better at telling stories.
It's also really fun in a way, because if you talk about comics, you and your artists, being Liam, the others, you are God, meaning what you do is what it goes. You create the budget, you create the epics, you create the emotion. What you guys do is God. But the moment you move to TV, as you said, you start working by committee. Has it been difficult for you to let go of that, full control, or for you it's like being, what, for once I can just let go and be a part?
No, honestly, for me, I just love being in different situations and scenarios and learning from it. So if I didn't have comics, if I didn't have a place where I could just express myself purely, I think it might be difficult. But the fact that I've got these different outlets and these different arms of the octopus makes it's easy. I mean, it's fun. That just becomes, okay, I'm in this world now and I'm playing by these rules, and isn't it great to play around those rules and see how they can be bent and stretched and how they work?
Yeah, because you always can fall back on on the pureness of comics to express your own ideas that you need to be only yours, right?
But it's a much smaller audience. Unfortunately, it's a decent audience in comics, and has been even better in the past. So you're kind of doing poetry, as I say, in a certain way, but at the same time, you've got a decent audience. It's better than most poets' audience. But television, you're going out to a lot of people, and so I think it's a very different way of thinking. It just appeals to me. I've always liked the idea of getting something on television that reaches a much wider audience who don't necessarily know who I am or bring any baggage to it, and are just watching, is this good? Is this experience formed? I like the characters. That's good, because I'm more into disappearing. I'm doing this thing, but I'm kind of just want to recede into the background after these comics.
You were mentioned before that you are working on the adaptation of The Invisibles.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult it is, because I think it's really difficult, but you're probably going to say no, it's not. How difficult it is to translate something that is so purely comics language into something as television, because the first moment you mentioned, I was thinking, how do you turn that into something, that is TV?
It's like translating French into English. It's just a translation, and then beyond the translation, it's a cover version. It's a new take. It's like a new singer. It's like a new band doing it. So there's a lot of leeway. And as I said, The Invisible is very fluid text for me. So doing something different with it has been, I hesitate to say, but it's been easy. I always knew how I wanted to do it for television, which was different from the comics. I've done the comic. The last thing I'd want to do is completely replicate work that I've done. So it has to be something that's contemporary.
Log Frank Howard asks, "Hi Grant, what were the ideas you had before when you started, when you accepted doing the X-Men comics, how did you think about the ideas or the ideas you wanted to have on those books?
I came up with, I didn't even know I was going to do the X-Men, but I have a notebook from the year before, and I designed a logo for new X-Men that you could spin, and it would be the same upside down. And so that was what started it. I thought, oh, new X-Men, it's like a combination of New Mutants and X-Men. And I've got this logo that spins. This is really great. And I didn't think about it until Joe Quesada offered me the job to do the X-Men, and that became New X-Men, and that logo was the foundation of it. So it was just a case of sitting with Vinny and saying what we wanted to do, and to have, obviously the X-Men film had been out, it was pretty good. I felt what I liked about it was that it was a science fiction film rather than a superhero film. So we decided, let's do a science fiction comic, not a superhero comic, the way it has been for a while. And we liked the idea of the X-Men not as a superhero force, but as a rescue and emergency team.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion was, it wasn't so much to put them in black leather. We had the idea of putting them in kind of municipal worker gear, like the gilet jaune, like the yellow shirts, like worn by refuse collectors or road workers, so that when they turn up, you know that the emergency services are here. So that those ideas come in as, let's do sci-fi, let's do emergency, let's do these kind of costumes, and it grew out of there, and then just tackling the idea, I could see the new generation was coming, that people had different opinions than they had in the 20th century. And the idea of maybe people like Xavier and Magneto were now a binary opposition, that there were younger people in the middle who thought that was ridiculous, or who had a different viewpoint. And so it became about that, and about, the growth of internet culture, where people were coming in from the margins. Queer culture was getting stronger, women's voices were getting stronger, voices from the underground, ethnic voices getting stronger. And it seemed that what I wanted to do was, okay, the mutants are going to win. Because the story had always been that, humanity was destroying, decimating the mutants. And I thought, no, because the children are always going to take over. That's what you're most afraid of. You're afraid of your kids because they're here to replace you. So our take then became, the X-Men are here to replace the mutants. The Homo superior are here to replace humanity. And humanity now has a sell-by date, a due date for death. And that became, here's a whole new way of looking at the X-Men, where suddenly they now have to provide culture. They now have to provide possibilities to the future. So we had Mutant Town, and we had mutant designers, and we had mutant bands. And it was like, if that would be the real terror for people, for readers as humans, that we were losing and they were going to win. But I think what happened was that the higher ups wanted the readers to empathize with the X-Men, so the X-Men had to be persecuted in a way, and I wanted them to this was their pride moment. But ultimately, the X-Men was seen to work better if they were persecuted, or they had been decimated and they'd all been wiped out and taken to camps. I just wanted to get beyond that metaphor and say, no, look, just that's, you keep doing that to them, let them explode. So I mean, I'm happy to see, I know Jonathan Hickman's doing something that's a lot more on the lines of, here's what happens when mutant culture is allowed to expand and take over. But that was where me and Vinny started, and that was all the things we were talking about, and that's why it opens with Homo sapiens killing Neanderthals, even though that may not have happened historically. It was a great opening image.
Yeah.
So it was about children replacing us, and it was, rather than the metaphor of the X-Men as minorities, it was the X-Men as our children. They are the coming race, the new ones, the Homo superior.
Yeah, they're the ones who are going to take over. And yeah, John Hickman is, you can see at the beginning that he drinks a lot of your concept of they are superior, they are going to take our place, and they know it. So it's based on that, yeah. Let me see. Carolina Bensler said, my first comics purchase as an adult was Arkham Asylum. What can you tell us about that comic that you never told before? I think that's a bit of a difficult, because he's been asked about that 2 million times only.
Yeah, I think I've told every story about that one. it was just one of those things. I've been working on it for years, talking to a friend back in Glasgow in the day, this really smart guy called Jim Clements. And we both just talked about what we'd do if we could do Batman. And this thing developed in my mind based on an entry that Len Wein had done for the Who's Who in the DC Universe. And he mentions Arkham Asylum and its founder. And so at the time, the whole notion was trying to do something that was like a weird European film, because Batman was so masculine, and it was Frank Miller, and it was so angst-ridden, and it was very much the Dark Knight was the great American novel with Batman. So we thought again, well, how can we do something different? And it was looking to European cinema and to Jan Schwankmeyer and those weird like Brothers Quay puppet movies, and trying to get a different sensibility. I kind of was Batman of the unconscious, and Batman that was dealing directly with symbols. And I loved the story of his, the founder of the asylum, Amadeus Arkham, because that seemed like the kind of television play that I wanted to write, creepy television stuff. So it kind of had we had high artistic ambitions with it. We wanted it to be like a play or like like European cinema, and to be very different from the dominant view of Batman. But I think a lot of people, I remember when it was released, people just were kind of freaked out, because this isn't Batman. It's like, but it's somehow it's persisted, and I grew to love it more and more. I read the recent edition with Dave redid all the artwork, and it's just spectacular. It looks great, and it is like a weird fever dream. It's not like any other Batman I would write, but I feel as if this is how Bruce Wayne dreams every night.
Let's go. Pedro Mercader asks, it's well known, your Kathmandu experience is well known.
Yeah.
But have you ever had any big revelation any time after that?
Oh yeah, there was lots more, but nothing with the nothing with the complete break that was with everything prior to it. It was like a completely different world, an actual real world that was more real than this world. And I've never had anything that reached that level of absolute immersion in a different frame of reference. So it was epic. It was really powerful. But yeah, I mean, I do magic. I've been doing it all my life. So there have been many occasions when major things have been triggered. Like I did a big ritual that resulted in Superman Beyond, the 3D book that was done as part of Final Crisis. And it's one of my all-time favorite stories, and it's super cerebral, and I was really channeling stuff. I wrote that in a very heightened state. And so there have been moments, and I felt I'd got to the very ground of my job, which was, again, to make a mark on this white space, this infinite, pristine, godlike space. And we come along and we etch some crude story
carving.
And I saw that was Superman getting right down to the grind of what's the first thing we do, the binary opposition, what could that be? It's Superman versus the ultimate vampire. So that one, things like that, and parts of Batman R.I.P. were really done in quite a strange heightened state of magical ritual and trying to break through to different ways of thinking. There have been a bunch of stuff, and me and Vinny have had some crazy experiences together up in the mountains. So there's always things, but not, like I say, not in that intense like atom bomb blast that thing was in Kathmandu. And it was just nothing could reproduce it. It wasn't like drugs. And people just say, yeah, it sounds like a DMT experience. I wasn't on DMT. I tried a bunch of things in the 90s after that to see, and nothing came close to it. It was super high fidelity realism on a scale and level that was hard to describe. And the download of information, as you know, was so potent, it inspired years of work.
Blake Rayval says, how do you feel about the new colors on Flex Mentallo for the collected deluxe edition, and what does that book mean to you?
It was my first attempt to do, not the first attempt, it was a serious attempt to do something I thought could stand the test of time about comics that was kind of grown up without using the model of Watchmen or any of the adult superhero comics. And my model for it was Dennis Potter's Singing Detective, where the guy's, he's in bed and he has the psoriatic arthropathy and he's covered in skin scales, he's in constant pain, but he's telling himself this detective story. And through it all, you have these 1940s big band songs, and they'll be acted out by the nurses, and you'll go into these weird states of hallucination. So I thought, let's have a kind of poorly protagonist. So I've got my guy who thinks he's committed suicide and he's dying in a back alleyway. And let's have, instead of old time songs, have memories of comic books to fill that. So it was kind of me, like I say, trying to do Dennis Porter, but with comics. And it was also me trying to do something like as I say, do something adult that wasn't Watchmen, that wasn't in that mold.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very personal, because I had to use biography. It had to be, well, what do comics mean to me? What have comics done for me? How have they been useful and not useful in my life? And be very serious about that, and to create a protagonist who could have been the Earth 2 me, who stayed in the band and didn't do the comics, but still had all the love for that stuff and the old drawings. So there was a lot of layering on it, and the places, the locations are real, Glasgow locations that Vinny drew, and we've been often research specific places. So it was very close to us. It was about our hometown. It was for me, it was about superheroes and what they meant to me. And for Vinny, it was just because he didn't like superhero comics. I had to try and explain to him, and I'd have all these references like the guy looks like Billy Batson. And he'd phone up and go, "Who's Billy Batson?" And I'd have to explain all this stuff. So, but that was great, because he brought a completely different thing, and that whole illustrative approach in the world building. But like I say, it was like little interior worlds, little model worlds that he'd actually built, inhabited by these characters. So yeah, I mean, it was very personal to us at the time, and I haven't really done anything like it since. So it was a kind of a one-off.
It is funny because when I was talking to Garth, he was telling me the same thing. Like, people have to understand that some of us didn't grow up reading superhero comics.
Mm-hmm.
That's something else. It's like for me, people ask me why I come back to do war comics all the time. Like, because that's what I read. That's what I got in Belfast. Those small. I don't remember the name. Like, he was telling me about those small.
Commando.
They were those ones. He was reading.
Those were the ones I wasn't allowed to read.
He was reading Commando from a small age. Like, that's what I read. That's why I relate to it. I don't relate to superheroes, as he said, as Grant or others do, because I didn't grow up reading them. I grew up, and I guess maybe that was the same case for Vinny, right?
Yeah, and again, and what Garth has done with that is the same. It's like what Flex Mentallo does with superhero comics. Garth has spent a career, taking those influences and doing super research war stories with real emotions and real grief and heart, and so he's kind of taken that and unfolded that into a higher dimensional type of storytelling.
Yeah, I think he read martial law one too many times.
Yeah, that too. But martial law is great. I mean, again, like martial law was Pat Mills' follow-up, and he looked at Watchmen and thought, okay, what I want to say about superheroes, and it was that virulent, angry. It's so good. It's so poisonous and bitter and brilliant. Especially, those first 3 or 4 books of that.
I love martial law.
Again, that was a time when everyone just said, "What's the best superhero story I can do?" And Pete Milligan would do Enigma, or him and Brendan do Rogan Gosh, which I know Brendan doesn't think of as a superhero story, but to me, it's a 21st century superhero story. Yep. So everyone was picked up that challenge, I think, and everyone did something really amazing with the basic, what's my big superhero story? What's my perfect archetypal version of a superhero story?
I asked Pat once about martial law. Like, well, I will summarize this in a phrase. It's like, what's the best part about superheroes? Like, that I hate them. That was my story. Like, yeah, you can see that. You really can see that.
But it's easy to hate them. He hates them so well.
Yes,
brilliant. And that imagination. And Pat, to me, is always like he's got an imagination on the scale of Kirby. Like that super, or Nigel Neal, or someone who's Michael Crichton. Just these big, amazing concepts that are all worked down to the last detail, whole worlds and characters and political, political motivations. He's brilliant. So
yeah.
But that with Kevin O'Neill at the peak of his invention, his ability to just invent a million new superhero costumes, and they all look great, and the guys are just getting killed or mown down by gigantic razor blade combine harvesters.
Is that creating new Kevin? Yeah, I didn't need a new design. You gotta kill him. Why? How many pages? No, one panel. So I have to keep creating new designs and new characters for you to kill. Yeah, like 30 characters in 10 pages. You just killed your camera.
It fell over. It's the cat. The cat's lying. This whole thing is balanced in the cat's little cat tree. It keeps moving.
So yeah, I keep talking about Marcelo because they're publishing a new collection of all of them, but the crossovers in Spain like next month. And I keep telling people, for all of you who haven't read it, you have to because
You go read it. Yeah, it's like
martial law is the precursor of many things you've seen in comics afterwards.
very much so, but it's better because as I say, the level of sheer invention in it is so high. That's what makes it better. That's what makes it brilliant. It's so well thought out.
Yeah.
And it's also rooted in all, CIA dirty tricks and experiments and biology. It's all really well researched as well. So no, I think it's definitely one to see, and it's you have to feel it. You have to feel that hatred, especially if you love comics. If you love Batman, read Kingdom of the Blind.
I remember when the first time I read the epic, edition of Martial Law Takes Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I was like page by page. I was like, oh my god. And I think it was like all the 48 pages from beginning to end. It's like, wait, Marvel is publishing this? What? Like, okay, whatever. Keep reading. I was just loving it. It was just that crazy. Anyway, Pedro de Mercader asks, for you, what's the most relevant part of the writer's craft?
Oh.
That's not an easy one.
The relevant part of doing it is just having ideas and something to say, and the ability and at least a level of education to say it in a way that can be understood. In terms of the craft, it's the practice, it's the endless doing it again and being willing to learn, being willing to take on new ideas and new ways of thinking. It seems to me to be the most effective. Just doing it and getting good at it. But to do it, ideas are the first thing. You really need to. You need to want to express yourself that way. Some people pick up the guitar, other people pick up the pen.
Okay, Mitos de Gotham says, hi Grant, good to see you. Greetings from Argentina. We had the opportunity to meet you at NYCC 2017. When do you think we will be able to enjoy such an event again?
Say that again. Sorry, I just hear my wife calling me.
Don't worry. No,
she's phoning because I didn't know this would still be going on. So,
excuse me.
I may have to. I didn't know how long we'd be going on, so I may have to pick it up at some point. But yeah, repeat the question.
As soon as when you need to leave, you just let me know. Don't worry about it. Okay. He just was telling me that he met you in New York Comic Con 2017. Yeah, and when do you think we are going to have such an event again?
Not for a long time. I think that the world is going to have to get over a few things before anything like that ever happens again. It seems a shame. It's a different universe now. But definitely not for a while.
I am jumping over questions here to go faster. Las Crónicas de Atlantis says, hello Grant, you have written Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, now Green Lantern. When are you going to write Aquaman and Mera?
Probably never. I did back when I was doing consulting for Warner Brothers back in 2008. I actually did a pitch for the Aquaman movie, and I did like 6 drafts of this thing, so that was enough Aquaman. But there was some good stuff in it, like Aquaman swimming up Niagara Falls. It was quite a good story, but yeah, that was enough Aquaman. Yeah, like I say, I'm probably not doing much more with those superheroes in any time that I can think of.
Yeah. Germán Muñoz says, regarding the needed shift in society you guys were talking about, we have good fiction creating narratives to explore. How could those changes apply to society? It seems right now, I am worried now, he says, that the fandom has started rejecting on prejudice instead of learning from them.
It's going through a phase. Back in the 80s, things were very much like this. It was a time of cultural audit, and people were dismissing parts of culture that they felt no longer worked. And now it's the same effect. It's just been aggravated by the fact that we have an instantaneous communication system where people can spend too much of their lives feeding the oblivion machine with, like I say, it's like the 7.5 billion people in the world, they're not going to agree with you. So it becomes a futile fencing match when no one can possibly win because no one's going to agree with you. Some people, maybe you'll get a few people. Ultimately, it's so small, it's a kind of a waste of time. But I think it's important. It's like I say, cultural audit has to occur. These questions have to be aired. People have to be allowed to think like this. But it will pass. The next generation, the young Zoomer kids, are completely different. Zoomers, they call them. But they have totally different attitudes. They'll come along, they'll seize the reins of culture, and young people will have very different thoughts. And the people nowadays will be audited in their turn, as we all are. So I just think this is one where we just have to wait it out a little bit. I think there is still a period of burning down the statues, still a period of toppling the monuments, and it has to happen. But beyond that, it can't just be that. It can't just be chaos and destruction. Someone, and I think it's not me and it's not my old generation, it's like someone will take over and have a forward-looking way of dealing with this because they have to. Either that's extinction, it's suicide, that's the simple choice, So someone will start thinking about how we've all been bought and sold by a few billionaires. Someone's going to have to deal with the destruction of the biosphere. Someone, and it's a shame we've dumped it on the kids, but I'm sure they're smart enough and angry enough to maybe start dealing with it.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old.
Their imaginations and their understanding of the network, which I don't have. They've got an understanding of network communication I just do not have, and that's the future, I believe.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old. Believe me, I'm not glad we're dumping all this on them. What I'm going to say, Kim Faraday.
It's just basically, I'll say it's not about gurus and wise men anymore. It's about the network.
Yes, absolutely. King Faraday, the name, says, "Hey David, K Grant, when can we expect the big crazy about your dad, Walter Morrison, and the war with Frank Quietly, which you have teased about?"
Yeah, well, honestly, I've tried to write a few times, and I've got so much information, and it's been hard to do, and I haven't quite got the method of delivering the story. I've got the story, but I haven't figured out how to deliver it. So it's waiting to be done, and it's kind of on the shelf. And one of these days, I'll wake up with the way to get the sound right.
Okay, Angel Perez. Hi, Mr. Morrison. I want to know about your run as an editor-in-chief in heavy metal. How was the experience? How much control of the content and decisions did you have?
We had control over the content. Yeah, I was choosing the strips and choosing the direction, but there was never enough money in it. So it would have been better potentially to get some of the people that we knew from outside comics in the world of music, but heavy metal just wasn't able to pay on the level that those kind of people were looking for. So a lot of my friends that might have done work weren't able to do it. But I still think we did a great job. But there was a lot of gay and lesbian creators. We opened up the sexuality of heavy metal to something that was a bit more on a spectrum. It wasn't just space tits as it had been for so long. We kind of wanted to see how other people saw the notion of sex and sci-fi together. So I liked all that. I think there was a lot of great strips in it, a lot of good stuff, and it was fun. But it was just a 2-year gig.
Robotman says, "How, Mr. Morrison? Greetings from El Salvador. I'm a beginning illustrator who dreams to work with you someday, like everybody. Hopefully one day I will. I have a question. Yeah. Whatever happened to the Multiversity sequel?"
There was never really a Multiversity sequel. It was just Dan DiDeo wanted me to come up on a panel in San Diego, so we kind of made some stuff up. So I would have a justification for being on the panel. So, and in the aftermath, I did write 25 pages of Arkham Asylum 2, but then didn't do any more, and the rest of it was just made up. It was never going to be a Multiversity 2. It was a title that Dan came up with, so I'm sorry for everyone who may have been
waiting. Do you have any plans? Juan Espiritu says, "Mr. Grant, do you have any plans to continue the story of Klaus?"
Potentially. We don't have one this year for various reasons, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing those things. And Dan Morris is one of the most amazing artists I've worked with. So there's that. There's always the potential for that in the future. I've got another one worked out.
Mhm. Victoria says, "How is a work day for?" I like this one. How is a work day for Grant Morrison?
It's these days it's quite easy. I get up and I exercise, and then I go for a 4 mile walk, and then I come home and I swim, and then I start work, and I work until the evening, and then stop. So it's pretty easy these days.
Mhm. I MG Gel Flimben Plop. I cannot say this screen name. I'm sorry. I will say 1, 2, 3. Could you consider online conversations with other chaos magicians, like the vlogs on the YouTube channel by Ramsey Dukes?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ramsey Dukes or Lionel Snell. I just, like I say, I'm kind of wanting to disappear. I'm bored with gurus and wise people, and I know we kind of got our place, but it's not for me anymore. I'd rather see new voices come up. So, I kind of said my thing. I've said it in my work, and I wrote a big piece on chaos magic, which was my kind of definitive piece for heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that almost says everything. I almost wrote a book on magic, and then I thought, man, it's too personal. I don't want to be an ideologue. I don't want to set myself up as someone who knows more. All I know is my own experience and my own existence, and I try to report it as faithfully as possible in the hope that it communicates with other people and makes connections. And,
Yeah.
so that's it. It's not. So it's a long way around of saying no. I don't want to put myself about.
So the magic, in a way, the magic of creation is your way to communicate with the world, right?
It's easy. I mean, that's just the idea of my face talking. This is okay, but this is probably the last. Just the idea of this dude just talking at you from the screen it seems so archaic.
Okay. What Francisco Sanchez? How do you think them? Okay, good one. How do you think the Morrison writer has changed from the 80s to now?
Just naturally by growing older and having more experience and trying harder to learn things. I was quite arrogant when I was young, and it was funny. I was just a kid, and now I'm an old man, and it's like you get experience and you become hopefully more compassionate and more understanding and have a wider range of things that you can think about and talk about. And you've read more, you've done more, you've been through shit, you've had the shit kicked out of you on many occasions. So I think if you can survive it and still be talking and still have an outlet for your thoughts, then I couldn't ask for anything better. But yeah, there's obviously a big difference. I'd like to think I was very different from myself at 20, otherwise I've learned nothing.
Okay, Philip Abreu says British girl comics are very underrated. It's great to see Rebellion having a go to revive them.
No, that's good. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff. My favourites in the 60s were the Judy and the Diana. They were brilliant. Mm-hmm. And then in the 70s there was Misty and the sort of supernatural stuff, which was great. So yeah, they should bring back a lot of those strips. And they were beautifully drawn. They had some of the best artists in British comics and in European artists working on them. Really, really great stuff that you didn't see anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, they weren't about war. They weren't just the British Army stabbing the Japanese man. I'll have to go soon. I've really got. I'll probably have to go soon.
Just one more, and we leave it. So Alejandro Germanico, the artist, says one big.
Hey, man, brilliant artist. Thanks for your work.
Yeah, he was saying a big hat for you. This has been really interesting, and he just wanted to say hello to you.
Yeah, say hi. No, he did an amazing job in that Black Stars book. I love him. Great.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing, this is for you. Agustin Jimenez says, Flex Mentallo helped me in my worst moment. So now I want to do the same with other people with my comics. Whenever I publish my first comic, get ready, because Mexico is the next British invasion.
Yeah, good. I know a lot of Mexican kids and creators, and they're great. So yeah, let's take over.
Okay, guys, Grant needs to leave. It's been a good while now.
My wife is summoning me. There are
yes, and I hear my kid she wants to give me my birthday present, so I can pick
Yeah.
her around the door. So we should. So please don't cut, because I want to say proper goodbye to you after I cut the live feed. But to all of you, first, thank you, Grant, for being here. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thanks everyone for listening in and putting up with all this nonsense.
It's been a lot of fun. They loved it. And to you all, thank you so much for being here. Have a nice weekend. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I know I haven't read 10% of them because that wasn't the point here, but thank you anyway. And see you all on Monday with another guest. Okay? I will reveal it later. It will be a surprise. Have fun. We're off in like 3,